This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Find Your Way with host Alison Pena and co-host Christy Anderson. Now, for those of you who have been following us, Find Your Way sort of morphed from grief belief, but we're going more in depth with this series, and I'm really excited about it because grief, it's there for all of us. And I would just add, as we go into today's segment, I'm feeling it awfully heavy today. So we never know how we're going to react. But Alison, you have a great guest. His name is David McNally. I've met David and talked to him in the past, and he has a remarkable story. So give us a little bit of background.
Okay. David is, he's a Hall of Fame speaker. He's an author of 5 books, including If You're Alive, Your Mission on Earth Isn't Finished. So I'm very interested in hearing about that because that talks about the grief of aging. You've also lost 2 wives, and so you're not a stranger to cancer. You are a survivor of cancer. So what I'd like to do is just open it up and tell us your story.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. Uh, Grief is a very deep subject, obviously, and unfortunately one that if we're really endeavoring to live as fully as we can as human beings, we can't get away from it. It's going to happen. As I have lost 2 of my wives, one to ovarian cancer and one to Alzheimer's. And what happens as a result of that is obviously the vision that you had for your future and what was going to happen, it disappears just overnight. And so you are left isolated in your own world and endeavoring how you can cope with it. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from just after my last wife passed away was that, and this was a woman who'd lost her husband a couple of years before. She said, people keep asking me when I'm going to move on. And she said, I find that question irrelevant, primarily because I love that man and I was married to him for 40 plus years. I'm never going to move on from the love that I had from him, but I can move forward. And I find that that's necessary to keep moving forward. And I thought that was great because even though I'd lost my first wife 20 years before, I love that woman. She's the mother of my 5 children. We met when we were very young in Australia. We had many adventures together. We had many challenges together. So I never stopped loving her. And I haven't stopped loving my wife that just passed away. And grief catches up with you at the least moment that you expect it, and it's quite synchronicity that we're talking about this, because I got hit in a major way just yesterday. I had spent the morning in a real disturbing melancholy. I just couldn't shift out of this melancholy. And I was out on a couple of appointments, and I'm driving back to my home, and I was listening to some classical music, and they started playing the soundtrack from Dances with Wolves. And I remembered the time that we went with my 5 children, with my first wife, to see Dances with Wolves. And for whatever reason, it was the catalyst that I couldn't help it. I just burst into tears. And so it was the grief that was piling up on me yesterday morning, the melancholy that I couldn't understand. And then all of a sudden, the tears told me, no, David, this is grief. It doesn't have a hold on you 24/7, but there are times when it will appear in your life, and there you have it, and that's how you identify it.
Hmm.
So a little bit about me is simply, yeah, I haven't been able to avoid some of those challenges. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I was telling the ladies, my mom died in December, and
Hmm.
so she and I both went to open mics together and wrote poetry and prose and
Oh,
stuff. And so
beautiful.
I was asked to write a piece, and now I'm editing it, and it's just taking me down. This work that we did together is bringing me right there. Yeah, so it can just jump up and bite you, right? At any moment. And you don't
I'm curious.
necessarily know what
Um,
happens.
yeah, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Allison. I'm
No,
curious,
it's fine.
David, if oftentimes when we have those moments of grief that just kind of sneak up on us, sometimes it's just random. You just never know. It just happens. But other times it's because there's an anniversary date coming up of some sort, which I just experienced myself this month with an estrangement loss of one of my children. And the anniversary date was this month, and it was just took me out. And I never know from year to year whether it's going to or not. But it did this year. So I'm curious if you noticed, was this some kind of possibly an anniversary date, or was it just a random incident?
Christy, it's fascinating that you asked that question because it's quite possible because I'm building up on next Tuesday, June 2nd, for the third anniversary of my wife's passing,
Uh,
my second wife's passing. And I have been thinking about it, and I've been thinking about how do I acknowledge it. Even though it's a very private moment in one's life, but how do I acknowledge it, and how do I celebrate her life in the best way that I can? I think that that did have and has been having an effect of me as I anticipated this date coming up. And the other thing, based on what you were just saying, is that in both of my marriages, both of the transition period was several years. So my first wife had ovarian cancer, and she battled that for 3 years. So there was the anticipatory grief that they
yep.
talk about, that something is going to happen. And then finally, when the oncologist said, there's nothing more we can do, her body won't take any more chemotherapy, because my first wife, she fought like crazy. She did not want to die. Well, she was a young woman. I mean, she was 57
Mm.
when she died.
Mm.
But she did not want to die. She had finally uh, 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 brought up 5 children. She was now free to do whatever she wanted. Now cancer comes along, and one that is still today incurable in many ways. There's not a cure for ovarian cancer. So there was that anticipatory grief. And then my second wife had Alzheimer's for 4 years.
Mm.
So we went through that, and as we prepared. So the difference between anticipatory grief and what I experienced, as compared to a friend of mine who's I went to a service recently, he died of a heart attack, going from what appeared to be extremely good health to just dying. And so
Hmm.
his wife was dealing with the shock, and that is a major first step often in grieving. I didn't go through that. I won't say I was ready for them passing, but I was more prepared for it because we knew it was coming. Yeah.
Mhm.
So over the years, have you come up with sort of ways to m make it through these times? Because we all know we've all experienced this, and we all know that it will hit us at some point. Almost always on anniversaries, but across other moments as well, which might be more unexpected. So what have you developed over the years? Because certainly I know that I've developed some strategies to make it through these times.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind that number one on that is acceptance. The
Mhm.
whole idea of accepting our lives as they unfold. So that, if you look at it from a teaching standpoint, there are three ways that we normally respond to any form of change that comes into our life, whether it's the loss of a loved one or any other unexpected, especially negative change. We can resist it. We can fight it. We can talk about that it's not fair. Why me? Blame God. Whatever it
Mhm.
is we do, we can resist it, but that doesn't mean it's going to go away. The second way people deal with it is in denial. This isn't going on. This hasn't happened. I bury my head in the sand. And finally, when I bring my head out of the sand, I find no, it's still here. So accepting that, yes, this is it, is absolutely the first step. This is
Mhm.
my life. This is the way it is. Okay, now what can I do about it? It's also important as a part of that acceptance, and this is my experience, is the fact that I accept that grief is normal. Yes, that pain,
Mm.
that sadness is really normal. And it's nothing, it's not wrong in any way. So you accept that, yes, okay. Now you wish that it would done will go away more quickly than it does,
Oh
but
yeah.
the journey is different for every one of us. And as with my experience yesterday, I would have thought after 3 years that I wouldn't get hit like I got hit yesterday, but I did.
Yep.
So there. So acceptance is the first thing. The other thing, and this comes out of numerous studies of couples where where one has died and the other has obviously survived, what type of person tends to move forward or move on in a more accelerated fashion than other people. And it's the couples where individually, although they were a
Mhm.
couple, they had their own lives. They had a sense of purpose. They had goals for their lives that were independent of their partner or their spouse. And it was in those relationships that that person had the best chance of moving forward more quickly than the relationships where there was, if you like, an entanglement between with the couple. They were entangled together. They did everything together, and and then all the songs come out. I am nothing without you, and
Yep.
so.
Yep.
I mean, you look at all that, and whilst they're beautiful, some of those songs, of course, the reality is that for us to survive this, it is important to realize that if I'm alive, there's still purpose for me. How do
Mhm.
I fulfill that purpose? And so for me, the survival strategy is to figure out ways that I can still contribute to others, to get out of myself, if you like. And initially, that's a bit of a strategy of distraction. I
Yep.
had a woman. Her husband was one of these who's died instantly of a heart attack, and we got together a couple of months after, and she said, "David, you're the purpose guru," which I don't say I am, but that's what she said. And she said, "I need to find purpose,"
Yep.
and I said to her, I said, "No, you don't. You need to survive." Your
Yep.
job right now is about surviving. Don't worry about your purpose. That will come. What can you do every day just to get through the day, just to survive? And the best way to
Mhm.
do that, and I'm not saying everyone will necessarily agree with me, is how can I distract myself? but hopefully distract myself in ways that are meaningful, that I find has meaning. And where I can find the support that I need. That's kind of where I find my best way, as even today, of moving forward when grieving.
What
Yeah.
happens when grief is more like numbness? You know, I'm constantly going forward. I'm constantly working at something, but I feel numb almost all the time. Um, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of my new widow friends keep telling me, go talk to your husband's ashes. I can't do that. I just, they're sitting in the dining room. I say hello in the morning, but I talk to him in my head, but I don't talk to him. And yet I'm feeling like I'm missing something all the time. And today was one of those days where a lot of my so-called purpose didn't fall into place. And I've been sitting here like, now what do I do with myself? Is that really grief that I'm going through, or what is that? It just doesn't feel right.
So, David, because you really have spent your whole career working with companies talking about purpose and are now talking about aging and purpose is maybe not always the big things. Like maybe survival is I can walk outside today. Maybe that's the purpose in one day. It was interesting what you said about survival. So could you talk a little bit more about survival and purpose? Because for the first year, there is this numbness, which is pretty normal, Karen,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it really is. I didn't expect to finish my day on such a deep subject, but thank you. Which is no, I'm kidding there, but that's part of um, what we really need to put our arms around as we talk about numbness and grief. And you talk about Karen, about your husband, and then Alison, you asked me about purpose. So. What I think is important in regards to numbness, and for example, your husband's ashes and that, it is the way that you symbolically, if you like, approach that, right? How do you approach those ashes? And I can't remember if we talked about the fact before, but I haven't obviously on this show, about how I have both of my wife's ashes together, right?
Oh,
And if I may share a story, because and it comes out of one of the best definitions I ever had or heard about enlightenment, right? To be enlightened, and that definition was lighten up, right? Lighten up. And so I try to do that, not in any way to disparage grief or disparage numbness or whatever, but it's to just endeavor to purposefully lighten things up. And I do that with both of my wives because they had such great senses of humor. And but the most beautiful story of a month before my second wife died, she was an extraordinary woman in her willingness to acknowledge my first wife. And there was never any competition. There was nothing about, oh, I want you to love me more than you loved her. None of that. She was fantastic in that way. The love was very distinct in each situation. But a month before she passed away, she was never this way inclined most of her life, but she started to talk about the next life. And because she was curious about, boy, is there one? And would I see my parents? Would I see my brother? And so she said to me one day, again, this is just a month before she died, David, do you think I'll meet Joe? So my first wife was Joe for Josephine, second wife was Cheryl. Do you think I'll meet her in heaven? And I went, absolutely, you will. And she said, I will. And I said, yeah, absolutely. She said, well, what will she say to me? And I said, I said, I know exactly what she'll say to you. She said, what? She said, she'll say to you, how the hell did you put up with him for so long? so,
I
so
love that. I love
I
that.
when Cheryl passed away, I had her ashes, and then by pure circumstance, I was cleaning out a closet and I found a beautiful little velvet box, only to open it, and there was a small urn with Joe's ashes. And I went, okay, let me put them together, and I do that. And the way I lighten things up is every now and then I enjoy a martini. And they are together, and so I finish the day. I'll make a martini, and they're just there on one of the cupboard benches. And I take my martini over there, and I just say to them, "Girls, may I join you?" Uh, and so obviously it's very playful, but it's the way that I lighten up something that is, serious and somber. And Karen, it does, if you like, help the numbness that we feel. It's one of the strategies or tactics to cope with and deal with this. So, kill your husband a few jokes that he hasn't heard. All right. I'll let you determine whether they'll be risque or not. That's exactly.
Sounds like a plan. Does sound like.
That's great.
Good.
That's great.
Can I ask a question real quickly?
Go for it.
I have a question, David, about this. So I would imagine that when you lost your first wife, this wasn't automatically a strategy for you. How did you come to this place of finding these ideas of purpose and the idea of lightening up? And how did you get there?
Well, I've been in the world of purpose for many years, and so again, going back retrospectively, before losing my wives or having cancer and all that, when I was in my mid-30s, I went through a crisis of meaning in my life. So I had been a young man who was very ambitious, had achieved quite a lot at a very young age, had been defeated big time when I was young as well, in a big way in business, but had made my way back. But I started to really question the value of what I was doing. In other words, was success acquiring another thing? Was it the bigger house? Was it a better car? What was it? And for some reason, it struck me that I was not going in the direction I wanted, even though people would look at me and say, my gosh, she's very successful. I wasn't feeling the success. And so I went into Christy a kind of a mild depression about it all. So I was working, I was, goal oriented, all of that, but I wasn't feeling right. And what happened was I came across a book that told the story of a remarkable Canadian boy. And it was purely, again, as we say, by accident. And this boy had lost a leg to cancer and went on to run the greatest marathon in history at that time, raising money for cancer because he wanted to, fight cancer. His name was Terry Fox, and he ran over 3,000 miles in less than 5 months and aligned the whole nation of Canada behind his cause and made an impact throughout the world. And so when I read the book, what occurred to me was the difference between Terry Fox and me was that he had goals to raise money, but he had a bigger purpose for doing that. And that purpose was, again, to eradicate cancer. And so I started to look into why was it that people the world admired, like the Cherry Foxes, like the Mother Teresa's, like the Martin Luther Kings, the Nelson Mandelas, what did they all have in common? And what they all had in common was that they were contributors. They contributed to life in different ways, but in their own way, because they wanted to believe that when they left this life, in some way they had positively impacted the world. And that resonated
Mhm.
with me as a very young age. I said, yes. I said, I want my life to have meant something. I want to feel that I have done something, not necessarily of significant in terms of fame like those people, but it had contributed value. And so I started to look and connect purpose to contribution,
Ah,
that we are here to contribute. So when people ask me why, what is my purpose, and the question attached to that is why am I here? Why am I on the planet? Why was I created? Which is kind of deeply philosophical in many ways. But when I delve into that, I say you are here to use your gifts and talents contributing to something that you feel is meaningful and important in your life. And part of your life's journey is to discover what that is and then commit
right.
yourself to that. And no matter what age we are, that is the journey that we continue to be on. And that is what I write about in my newest book, which is aimed at the people who are at 60 plus, writing the next chapter of their lives. It's just to say to them, no, your mission isn't over. You've got purposes to be fulfilled. It may look different to what you've been doing and will be different, but my goodness, it's still there, and you've got a lot of living to do. So that's how I look at purpose.
Love that.
Yeah. I was very interested to read about your pivot to talk about aging because there is grief to aging. There is grief to the limitations of aging, to the body getting less able, the balance getting less steady, the mind starting to lose words. And I know that I cared for my mother-in-law until she was almost 103 after my husband died. So almost 10 years.
Wow.
And then my mom was starting to get very distressed about her mind. She wasn't as facile with words as she had been. So we went to the doctor and she was saying, I can't find my words. And she said, what words are you having trouble finding? And she said, she was taking an environmental law class and she could not find the words for her class. And the doctor said, when you stop remembering what a chair is, you can worry. Not to make light of that, but um, so I was interested to hear what you had to say about kind of aging in the workplace because you're talking some about the role that people who are older, who have institutional knowledge, history, can contribute to the workplace. You were talking about um, anyway, you've dug in your latest book, as far as I can tell, on the topic of aging. So I wanted to see what you had to say about the possibilities, the limitations, the grief, whatever about aging.
Yes, thank you. The I like to say that age is a chronological fact, not an indictment.
Hmm.
It is we are growing older. I feel it in my body. I'm in August. I hit the big 80, and that's a big number for a lot of people. And but what I know about it is that when I go up and down stairs, which I'm very, very privileged to be able to do without any effort, but I hold on to the railings because
Hmm.
that's a very important safety measure to do. And I can't run, but I can walk. So a part of aging, I think, aging successfully is to focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. And what I know that happens, and I appreciate, was it your mother-in-law or your mother went into the environmental law?
My mother, she
Your
was
mother, how
88.
old?
She was
88. So just look at that as a model. It's an amazing thing. So what that speaks to the fact that even though our body is aging, that mentally we still have a lot of acuity, and all the brain research that is out there tells us that the brain continues to make connections that expands it. And so that is, I think, a very helpful piece of information to have. The I always love one of my favorite theologians is a man called John O'Donohue, and John O'Donohue. Excuse me, just a moment. I apologize to do this in the middle of your, but my phone went off there. John O'Donohue said he was a Catholic priest for 19 years, and he said, "So I know the will of God." He said, "But what I'm more fascinated about is the imagination of God." And what we don't lose, and what he was talking about was the expansiveness of the universe, the amazing things that surround us every day. So when we talk about aging and vital aging, one thing I ask people to look at is what sort of conversations are you involved in? If you're having conversations, are you immersing yourself in the ain't it awful conversation? Right, that conversation where the world is coming to an end, where the news is depressing you on a daily basis. Are you in that conversation? Well, if you're in that conversation, you're not going to be enjoying your life. There's going to be a lack of joy and happiness in your life. That's just the way it is. So what you need to do is realize that there's so little that we have control of in the world that we have to get down to that ability to be able to understand what can I and what can I not control, and let go of what I cannot control, move into what I can control. And as I do that, I then can help shift my mindset from ain't it awful to isn't that amazing? Because what is true about the world is that there is lots of amazing things going on and that surround us every day. There are still inventions. There are people working on the climate. There are people working on how to help elders live their lives better. There's just many, many wonderful things going on. And even the as we in the northern hemisphere are doing now, moving from winter into spring, that whole rotation of nature that is amazing. That happens every year on a regular basis. Now people say, well, yeah, well, that just is the way it is. No, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. I speak to a lot of groups that, primarily our seniors, and I tell them, I said, and there could be 100 people in the room, and I asked them, how many of you do not have one of these? And I hold up a cell phone, and not one person puts their hand up. Every one of them has a cell phone. And I then tell them the story. Well, let me tell you a story about cell phones. When my grandson was 13, he's now 29, but when he was 13, he came to see me. And the reason he came to see me was because he was having a problem with his mother being my daughter, right? And I'm very close to my grandson. And so I said, Evan, I said, sounds like you have a big problem with your mom. And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, well, tell me what it is. And he says, she won't let me have a cell phone. What do you think, Granddad? And I went, okay, I got to choose between my grandson or my daughter. So obviously, I'm going to talk. I'm going to choose my daughter. I'm not going against my daughter. So I said to him, "Well, Evan, I do think you're a little young to have a cell phone." To which he replied very honestly, "Well, Granddad, how old were you when you had your first cell phone?" To which I replied, 50. He had no concept that cell phones at one time did not exist. So we today, even those of us who have reached the senior category in life, we can't do without these things. They have become immersed into our everyday lives. So aging can be a time, and I think it needs to be, it is a time of self-discovery. It is a time of emotional and spiritual exploration. It is the time of deepening relationships that we have with others, with our friends, and with our family. It's not about getting rich any longer, it's being enriched. That's what aging is about. But like anything in life, we have to commit to that. We have to
Yep.
make that commitment to age successfully and vitally. And then again, we have the benefit of so much wisdom. We've been through so much. Myself losing my wife, my journey with cancer, my success and failures in business, whatever it is, we've been through so much. And it's that wisdom that we can now take into this next phase of our lives. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I'm sort of seeing a parallel between what you were saying of couples who have different things that they do together, but also things that they do separately, and people who are aging who either contract in the face of their limitations or expand. And that's a choice.
It's a daily choice, Alison. It's a daily choice. Every morning we wake up. Let's just take what you just said. We ask ourselves the question, will I expand or contract? Will I grow or will I decline? Will I regress or will I progress? These are choices every morning. And one of the things, and this is a common thing that is said, but it's very important that we realize that we are the authors of our lives. Where we are today, we've had a great deal of influence on what we have created. Yes, there have been other influences over which we had no control, but we've made choices and decisions every day that has led us to where we are today. And that will continue. That doesn't go away. If we wake up in the morning, okay, faced with the choices, what am I going to do today? So every day we begin to create our lives moment by moment. So that even begins if we're in a relationship, if we have someone in the home we're sharing with, a partner, a loved one, whatever it might be, we start creating the feelings of that morning between us. You know, with the feelings of love, the feelings of affection, the feelings of connection. We start to do that by the way we behave and act towards the other person as we go out into the world. And if we want to keep as healthy as possible, you know, we walk, we exercise, we eat the right things, all of the fundamentals that we've learned from many, many books that are out there. But the other part of it is this, is that the Mayo Clinic, which you know of here in Minnesota, their studies all show that without question, the greatest contribution to longevity is strong social connections. So part of what we create in our later lives is these social connections. We can't wait for people to come to us. We need to put out the effort. Even if we might be more shy and retiring and introverted, we have to have the courage to get out there and build stronger social connections. And therefore, we become the beneficiaries of it.
Yep. Yep. Um, you have a term that you use or you said in your bio, empathetic clarity. What is that?
Well, the empathetic clarity was very much focused on people who were dealing with seniors.
Mm,
Or as the term I love to use, as you know, is elders, right? And I like the term elders because it has a quality to it of wisdom. And people who have something to offer the younger people. I love that. Now, I wish, obviously, that more young people would appreciate that, but many of them do. And there's lots of efforts out there to bring younger and older people together to share their experiences. I think that's beautiful. But empathetic clarity is towards those organizations that are dealing with seniors and endeavoring, if you like, to get their business right. So you might have financial advisors, people in the healthcare industry, whatever that might be. So it's to really respect the elder and the senior for their brilliance, their genius, the fact that they intellectually they are still sharp, they're knowledgeable. They've had a lot of people trying to sell them things over the years, and so empathetic clarity is the ability to get into their world and respect their world, to acknowledge their world, and treat them the way they want to be treated. Because what seniors want to be, they want to be dealt with is by people who are authentic. They
yeah,
are authentic in their connection with them. And so they are there to solve their problems and meet their needs in the most respectful way. That is what empathetic clarity is.
great. Um, I wanted to ask, so you said, when you wake up in the morning, if you have a partner there, it's how you relate to the partner. So I lost my husband, Karen lost her husband, you lost your wives. When you wake up in the morning and there's nobody else there, how do you speak kindly to yourself? How do you create an environment where you are nurturing yourself if there's nobody else there?
Yeah, I love this. I love this question. Uh, Only because I'm challenged by it on a daily basis. To this day, I am very hard on myself. I have very high expectations, uh, and I endeavor to uh, live the way I've lived for many, many years in terms of setting goals and have my to-do list. And I'm finding that it's no longer serving me the way it used to serve me. That I am at that point where I want to let go of that in many, many ways. I've had a practice for over 40 years, even of course during my marriages, where I get up early in the morning and I journal like many people do. I write in my journal, and my journal is not a diary of what went on. My journal is about how I'm feeling, how I'm facing the day ahead. What were the thoughts that last night that tried to bully me, make me negative, throw fear into my life? So that is what that journal is about. And then I have several publications that I read that lift my spirits and bring me, quite frankly, into the present moment of today. Today is the gift I have been given, and it's my responsibility to find as much joy today as I can. Now, you can't
Mhm.
force it. I got to be very careful here because I don't want to set things up where I'm saying, well, you need to be joyful. No, you don't need to be joyful. It's just more enjoyable being joyful. And that's the way it is. But it has to come organically, if you like,
Hmm.
and in a way that is natural. But that person isn't there. There's no doubt about it. When I sit in the same chair, right opposite where my wife used to sit. So our ritual was that I would be up early, she would come down, I would make a cup of tea, I would bring her cup of tea, and then we would chat with each other, get caught up with each other. And of course, when the Alzheimer's started to progress, she was still very communicative. But it was more the tears flowed more often, and you dealt with that as well. Uh, but there is again, we go back. I think I wish I was more helpful, but you go back to that acceptance, of what is, and go through and create new rituals, new ways of doing it in the best way that you can.
Yep. That's great. That's great. We always like to remind our audience that everybody's grief journey is different. So,
Mm,
however you're doing it is the right way,
yes, I
whatever
love
that
that.
looks like. And that progressing is sometimes a baby step and sometimes a big step. And it's still progressing. And that's fine. Um, two last things. What is one thing that you would like to leave our audience with? And this could be open to anyone who wants to say anything about this episode. And how can people find you?
Yes, good, thank you. I really I want to go back to John O'Donohue for a moment because he spoke to the individual uniqueness of us all in a very, very special way. And the way he did that was he talked about the human face. He said, None of us have the same face. None of us throughout history have had the same face. He says even identical twins have something different about them. And so what I want people to understand is that there is this uniqueness about them that they really need to value and appreciate. And how therefore can they find ways to move forward in the midst of this grief? Accept the grief, but keep moving forward because if they're alive, what they have to contribute is very important. That smile that you give the person who you're checking out the groceries from, you don't know about what their day is like. Uh, and that smile can make all the difference to them. The way that you treat a server in a restaurant, the kindness that you show, whatever that may be, it's very, very important, and not to undermine or the significance of these things. That's what makes the world go around. And if there's anything we need more that today is we need more kindness out there. So
Mhm.
that's do not devalue the smallest of contributions. As Mother Teresa said, people say what about Mother Teresa, what I do is just a drop in the ocean. And Mother Teresa used to say, yes, but the ocean would be less without that drop. And that's the way I like to look at what I do and share with other people. I love to hear from people. I love to feel that there are others in the world that connect to these messages. So my website is very comprehensive. David McNally, DavidMcNally, davidmcnally.com. All of my books are listed there. Contact information. Love to hear from anybody. So that's the way to contact me.
Thank you so much. Any last words from you, Christy or Karen?
Well, David, thank you so much. This has just been wonderful.
Right.
I've loved hearing you speak. I just wanted to share, I think one of the things that I love is this idea of purpose, one of my favorite quotes is life is random, bring meaning to it. And I feel like that's just what you said. We all have our own unique way of doing that. And in the beginning of grief, that's going to be tiny, tiny, tiny things. And as you move on, it might get bigger. In the beginning of grief, it's heavy, it's hard, it's difficult. You're going to be sad. I always say to my clients, we can't take away the sadness. It's going to be sad. Pain, we can do something about intense pain. But when you lose someone you love, it's always going to be sad. But that doesn't mean your life ends. You still have purpose. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, it's no, my pleasure. And I love that. It is our responsibility to find the meaning. So I do love that very much. Thank you. Yeah.
And David, I want to thank you because before we came on the podcast today, I shared with Christy that I was very numb, wasn't sure that I really wanted to be here, but I knew I had to be. And I'm so glad because you reminded me of the same words that I use almost daily. And that is, I have to have a purpose. And I do have purpose. I look for the happiness and I realize that it's not always there. And that's okay. But if I can keep looking for it, I eventually find it. And it does take some of that pain away. I know I'm in the early stages of grief. And I, like so many other people, just want it to go away. And listening to you, I know it never really will. It will just be different. So thank you for that. And I hope all of you listening are getting the energy that you need from our podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Like, subscribe, share, come back. And you are a contribution to us, to our audience, and to the world. Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you. And all of you too. I mean, this is very valuable. It's wonderful work. I commend you for it. And I feel very special being invited. So let's do it again when I'm 81.
Sounds wonderful.
Good.
Have a great year.
Good.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank
thanks so
you.
much.